part of the big problem with the disclosure of influencer marketing and business stuff is also being just short-sighted, because people are just too focused on this quarter, and this quarter is everything that matters. And because you're not seeing farther from that, then you're not going to see good consequences or the bad consequences. And that's just poor strategy.
We have to remember, it's not about the number of views, it's about the quality of the people behind that view in relation to your TAM. Creating a moonshot piece of content, it doesn't need, the barometer of success doesn't need to be 1 million views on YouTube. It needs to be a good percentage of your TAM consuming that is all you need. Creating close to zero sales out of that, rather than targeting the super high intent but very low traffic keywords that actually result in sales.
The most important one that we can talk about, especially that we've touched on influencer marketing, is compensation.
What I like about self-reported attribution, it's generally right, but it's not 100% right either. But if you just look at first touch or last touch or digital attribution touch points, you're going to be almost 100% wrong.
Because deep down they want a silver bullet. They don't want an ocean of grays where you need to work, think, and strategize. They want a post that makes me rich for 2 years. Come on, man.
Welcome to the FounderVideo podcast, an interview series bringing you the latest and greatest info on B2B marketing, revenue operations, and go-to-market strategy from respected experts. Here is your host, Yuste.
So here we are for the 29th episode of the FounderVideo podcast. Today we have with us Erik Jacobson, founder and CEO of Hatch, running the content playbook for Chris Walker and Dave Gerhart, two pretty well-known personalities at this point on LinkedIn. And we're here to talk about content marketing, B2B, how to run it, how to do it properly, what it takes, and all the ins and outs of that. So yeah, thanks for coming.
Yeah, thanks for having me, Will. Excited to chat.
It's a pleasure. Yeah. So the first thing I wanted to ask you is, before you started Hatch, you were running LemonPie, which is, if I'm not mistaken, a PR agency, right?
Yeah, exactly.
So what was going on at LemonPie when you first started Hatch? Because if I'm not mistaken, there's a little bit of an overlap time there where you're running both. What was in the world of PR while you were running LemonPie that made you see which I think is a bigger problem that you're now solving with Hatch?
Yeah. So LemonPie was my first real business after I kind of quit my job and realized this is like entrepreneurship is what I wanted to do. I had done some freelancing work for some big podcasters back in like 2014, 2015. And basically what I saw at that time, it didn't click for me that like this was like technically PR, but what I saw was like authors. So that I was working with like Tim Ferriss, Jason Calacanis, and a bunch of really big podcasters, and authors who were launching books would go and get on 50 podcasts over like a 2 or 3 month period and sort of blitz the market with like promotional effort around the book. And I thought that was a really smart strategy that could be done for companies. And so that was like the original idea for why I created LemonPie, was to help CEOs do that exact same strategy, and essentially be a guest on every single podcast in the market that their possible buyers could be listening to over a relatively short period of time. And that worked well. That company did well. We got it. It was seven-figure business, and it did great. But eventually, our clients started asking us, well, should we be creating our own podcasts and our own content? And so they kind of pulled us into the market, to be honest. And this was still early days. Like people weren't entirely sure what podcasting was. Like, are people listening to this? How do we measure success? All of that kind of stuff. This was 2018, 2019, when we really started getting into production. So we started doing production inside of LemonPie. And ultimately, I realized we should split these companies. So Hatch was sort of split out from LemonPie. And then ultimately, I realized I don't like running two companies. It's just like some people can do it, and I think it's cool. I think a lot of people make it seem easier and cooler than it really is in like the day-to-day, to be honest with you. And so I placed my bet on the company I wanted to really go full head of steam with, which was Hatch, for the reasons you mentioned, like the market opportunity, what I enjoyed the most, what I thought we could provide, even more value with, and all of those things. And Hatch was a smaller company at that time. Like I traded a larger company that was easier to run for me because we had been doing it longer, for a smaller company at the time with a lot of stuff to figure out, but it was a good trade, and I'm very, very excited. I still think it's early days for what we're doing.
Yeah, I think it definitely is. Because actually, when you were doing LemonPie, you saw it was first book writers, right? What other personalities or like other people you start seeing at companies that made you think, oh, actually, this thing of getting on podcasts and kind of like do a blitzkrieg over social media and creating sort of like this buzz, right? Can be done for companies. It can be pretty profitable, right? Because it's not a one man band. It's you can sell higher ticket stuff. What made you think about this? I guess it's pretty obvious now that we think about it, but back then maybe we probably latched onto something, talked about it with someone. I don't know.
Yeah.
How did that develop? Yeah.
Yeah, I think I just saw how powerful that the medium was in building a like relationship. Like as we all know now, it's like you're listening to somebody for 60 minutes. Like the affinity on that is the highest you could possibly get from a cold start audience standpoint. And then the host is got credibility with the audience, and they're lending that credibility to the guest. And I started listening to a lot of business. This was like back when there was really not a lot of business or entrepreneurial podcasts. And so basically what I saw is like a big opportunity for CEOs and companies to do that. Really nobody helping them do that, but a proven model that was already being done by a different segment, authors, like health. There was a lot of health and wellness people doing that stuff back then. Those were the two main categories I saw, like fitness, health, and authors. And then there were more and more business related podcasts getting started. And so I just saw like not necessarily arbitrage there, but a big opportunity. And so, yeah, that's what we started with.
Totally. I guess I'm not gonna assume that the turning point was starting working with Chris Walker, but I would definitely I would definitely assume that was a big thing, because I mean, to me at least, I think it's a great example of how to do a great playbook. But I guess my question was more so in the lines of, first I wanted to get to know like what's the story behind starting to work with Chris Walker and everything that entails. Because I'm assuming that probably there's a lot of learnings that then shaped how you guys do things at Hatch, right? And frameworks and whatnot. But also, was that a turning point? And if not, like what was a turning point for Hatch?
So yeah, how I got to work with like Chris and DG, so Chris Walker, Dave Gerhart, that was actually through something that we preach a lot, which is one of the benefits of doing this content is the ability to build relationships through it. So the first time I ever spoke to either of them was when I invited them to be a guest on my podcast in like 2020, around that time. And good things are not just going to magically appear after that, but that's an entry point to the relationship. And so what I did after that was just continue to foster it and try to build that connection and friendship. And ultimately, when I saw and continue to engage with them, and ultimately when I saw that they might need some help for whatever like thing they posted or something, I noticed that they might need some help with some of this content stuff that they're doing, their podcast, their video, all of that. That's when I reached out and already had a year of touch points with them. So I was like known to them. We were somewhat friends at that point. I wasn't just cold emailing them out of the blue, which would have been nearly impossible. And so that's how it happened. And then just slowly over time, it evolved to where we helped with more and more and more, into ultimately like pretty much handling all of it, their podcast and video content and, LinkedIn video clips and stuff like that. So yeah, it was not a like quick process, but it was very worthwhile. And I don't think you really can do it quickly, to be honest. So that's where I think most are a little short-sighted when they try to get these, really high level sort of influencers and advisors, stuff like that. It's a little too like transactional, and that's just, it's not how it works.
And the idea that people have of becoming one as well is too transactional. Like they confront it as a like a methodical thing. Like, oh, I just need to go through this playbook. Like, oh, my like, little chores and stuff. No. It's not about It's just, I think it's deeper than that, right? It's a matter of also looking inwards, knowing how to know yourself, how to the best ways you convey in what formats. How can you be best productive to put out even more messaging in different formats, like. It's tell me about that, like from working with them and also like increasing the scope over time, because as you said, not an overnight thing, is that, and that's what makes it valuable, right?
Mhm.
What were some of the most transcendental, so to speak, and by transcendental I mean learnings that you were able to then extrapolate to other personal brands that you've seen that are
Mhm.
helpful for other people by working through working with DG and Chris?
Yeah, I think everybody in B2B can study what they've done over the last 5 years and take some real core fundamental principles from it, and then apply it to their own market, to their own domain expertise that they have, and maybe sort of different formats. I really believe there's no right way to do content. Like you said, like there's not one standard playbook. If you give, like, we could look at counter examples on both sides of something in terms of a format or approach or strategy, and polar opposites, but both are successful for the companies that are doing them. So I always like to just remind and remember that, to be honest with you, is like, it's really easy to be like, oh, look at this case study. And then we like try to go copy that. But what's interesting is usually the people who created that success with that case study were not copying anybody else themselves.
That's such a great point. I'm asking you like things in common. The things in
Yes,
common they have. The only thing in common
exactly.
they have is that they don't want to have anything in common with anyone. Exactly.
And I'm just setting the baseline. Like, there's things we can study and talk about for sure. I just like to remind people of that. Like, the people who usually create the best practice were not following a best practice. And so that's really important to remember. But the main thing with Chris and Dave is the sheer unwavering commitment to the quantity and cadence. I mean, if you just literally, and this is not something we should take lightly and like overlook, like if we go look at their archives and we look at the number of episodes and the number of posts and the number of clips and the number of pieces of content they've created over the last 5-6 years, it's probably top 1% on all of LinkedIn, all of podcasts, all of YouTube, all of that stuff. They don't miss weeks. They post pretty much every day, posting multiple episodes per week. And they're not, what the key was for them is they didn't look for, quote unquote, like an attributable sort of ROI marker for that stuff at like day 30, day 60 into it. Because now at day 3000, when it's like pretty much the most important, valuable thing they've probably ever done for their businesses, they would have never been able to get to this point had they tried to measure it like that at day 30, day 60, day 90. And that's one thing that I see a mistake with a lot of companies, is trying to prove quantifiable ROI from a pipeline revenue attributable, like from like a digital touch point attributable. And there's a bunch of stuff we can talk about with that, but too quickly. And you can and should be able to, if your content is not creating pipeline and revenue for you, something's wrong. But how you measure that, and the what you're measuring and at what time points and time periods through that entire content engine, that's the important stuff to get right.
And it's not so many things to unpack right there. I don't even know where to start, but I guess what you said right there, first off, to pick on the fact that they don't have anything in common with anyone. The people that create best practice don't follow best practice, right? Because they're just, it's, again, as you said, not only the commitment but the confidence and the
Yep.
unwavering pursuit for truth and confidence in your ability to get to it, right? I think that's also a great. It shouldn't be overlooked, because a lot of people think that they can be leaders in the market or create content that's followed by masses without having great conviction in their ideas, and there's no such thing, right? And I wanted to let's segue this into, because I could go on and on with many points that you made. Attributable, my take is that if you admit that content or or exponential organic distribution, let's call it that, is as much of a moat as product. Nobody's measuring a 60-day ROI on an engineering team, right? So it's the same thing.
What's the ROI of your website? Like, you need a website. You have to have one. Otherwise, the business, you're not going to be able to capture the intent, capture any demand. So it's like,
And if you want to be a market leader these days, you need to have exponential organic distribution in the same way that you needed to have a product that worked 25 years ago, and that was enough, right? Let's segue this into the prior work that you do with clients, and especially with Chris and Dave. I'm assuming that this also has been like an ongoing improving process, because, a lot of people might think from the outside that they're in a constant flow state and they live exerting their essence in such a comfortable way, right? Like, it's not, I mean, I'm a creator myself, and it's really hard. Like, some days, sure, it feels amazing and it feels like playing. It should feel like play most days. But there's ups and downs, and there's a bunch of stuff that goes through it, especially when you go on the long run for like years, right? So what is the inner work that you see? Well, not inner work, jobs to be done prior to launching a video content marketing program when it comes to, I think, stuff that I think it's critical to talk about and get clear on before getting into the, what are we going to talk about in the content, or where are we going to publish and at what times or whatever. It's positioning, it's market sophistication analysis, maybe even introspection if you're a founder, like if you're doing, founder-led or whatever. But most importantly, I think market analysis at like a macro level to understand kind of like consciousness levels and where you stand in the market, and based off that, kind of like what your messaging should be, right?
Totally. Yeah, there's a bunch that can go into this. One thing that I see that a lot of companies get wrong is, if we look at like 80-20, like where are you spending the 80% of your time versus the 20%? Most are spending the 80% on like technical things that are just like the checklist of like, these are the things we have to check off the box in order to even just have a podcast. Like, we need mics, we need equipment, we need Riverside, like all of those sorts of things. And then the 20%, so that's the 80% for a lot of companies. Then the very small little leftover is like, what is the promise we're making to our audience with this content? What is the positioning of the content? What is the problem we're trying to solve with it? Who is the exact persona of the person we want to become obsessed with this and tell their friends about it, who are also that persona, and just so happens to be the people that we sell to? So those should be flipped. Like the strategy, and we'll just bucket that as strategy, content strategy. That should be the 80% of the time spent on getting this off the ground. 20% should be on like the things that you can Google or type into ChatGPT of like, how do I get a podcast, or what tools do I need and stuff like that. All that stuff is you can Google. But the things you can't Google is, what is going to make my show, my pillar content engine successful? And that's where you should spend your time. And the two main ways you can explore this from just a practical standpoint is audience research and competitive research. And so audience research being number one, especially if you have multiple personas or ICP, that, identifying who is the person. Like we have to have a person in mind that is the exact persona that we want to be in the audience of this, so that exactly who you're solving for.
And then, persona, just let me add a note there. A persona is not a combination of SalesNet filters. It's a combination of emotions, situations, jobs to be done, etc.
And then it's really just simply, and this is what I recommend, honestly, is like literally talking to those people. You may not have a huge number of people in your audience currently to be able to do this, where you like have 50 or 100 people fill out a questionnaire helping you inform some decisions about the show. But even if you just get on a call with 3, 4, 5 people who are that exact persona, that maybe are already in your world, they're already customers, and you just go through questions with them. what content do you consume? What podcasts do you listen to? What don't you like about those? What do you like about them? What topics are you faced with in your career every day that are challenging or that you want to learn more about? And ultimately you just go through and they'll answer something. And then usually the best information is on that follow-up question. Can you tell me a little bit more about that? And then they go deeper. And even just with 3, 4, or 5 of those calls with the people you want to target, the amount of information you will get from that on the direction you should take this content is going to be insanely valuable. And then the competitive research is, you could use a tool like Raphonic or Listen Notes and stuff like that to basically type in, like if you're targeting marketers, you can essentially go to those tools and type in marketing, like B2B marketing, and it will give you a list of podcasts that already exist for that category. And you can kind of just do an analysis of them, like how are they positioned? What's their cadence? What type of format do they have? Are they even active? And all of that is to help inform how much you should differentiate. And should you maybe don't even need to. Just because a show is positioned how you want to be doesn't mean you can't do the same thing and just out execute them. So yeah, those are just like a few ways you can think about some of that pre-work to help inform and decide like what direction you should go with your show or, your content in general.
Audience research and competitors research. I love that. Supply and demand analysis, I guess.
This podcast is brought to you by FounderVideo.com, a LinkedIn ads agency and go-to-market consultancy. Increase your brand authority and reduce your cost to acquire a customer with a holistic content marketing narrative, signal-based selling, and natural-looking ad creatives that prospects actually want to consume. Just have an expert in your C-suite show up to a 90-minute interview once a month and let us take care of the rest. Turn LinkedIn ads into a scalable revenue channel that fits into your go-to-market strategy. Book a free consultation at FounderVideo.com.
What are some questions a founder should ask themselves to create an aesthetic around? And when I say aesthetic, I don't mean colors or branding or just how it looks, but also how it feels. Most importantly, because brand is always in SaaS specifically, people mistaken it for arts and crafts, and I think it has more to do with engineering than most people think. But what questions should a founder ask themselves to get to the answers about how to build that? Again, aesthetic in terms of like brand, right? Around their solutions narrative that attracts out market prospects and turns them into in-market buyers in the shortest time frame possible. Like, how do you get to, identify the components of what makes your solution narrative appealing or attractive to a certain market segment and then expand from there? Because I think Chris did this perfectly, so.
Yeah, I think it first starts with having or building or pursuing a differentiated product. Because like everything you're going to talk about it's ultimately to create demand for the product. But what you talk about can be informed by your opinion about the problem, you being opinionated about the problem you solve. And that being built into your product. So that it's almost like it's a feedback loop between the product and the content itself. And then from that, developing points of view and your like strategic narrative and your messaging that is also differentiated. And then that is what gets distributed in the content. So like Chris's content and the stuff that he comes up with is because he's really pursuing having a differentiated solution to the problems he sees in B2B marketing. So he did that with Refine Labs. He approached how they built and what they offered at Refine Labs differently than a lot of other marketing agencies and consultancies. And that's because he was pursuing what he thought was more effective that everybody else was not doing. And so that's a differentiated point of view that he then just built like some names around and some methodologies around, and then shared that in the content. And the key, honestly, you'll know that this is working if you get on sales calls and the people you're on calls with not only say like, hey, I've been following your content, or like I listen to your podcast, or I've been following you on LinkedIn. It's great. But like the key is they are repeating back to you your own language. And that's when you know you're hitting on something that is working. And so step one is to get that awareness and interest in the content. And then step two is you'll know it's really resonating when people are repeating your language back to you in it. And ultimately, like a true marker that I like to think about with this is, has the content changed the behavior of the audience? Like, it's one thing to have like theories and concepts that are nice to learn about, but if you are actually changing the behavior of the audience and your listeners and your followers and all of that on LinkedIn or podcast or YouTube, and they are now doing something different about how they approach their work or career or a certain playbook or a tactic because of what your guidance was, you can't get anything more like stronger than that, in my opinion.
That's what a marketer's job is at the end of the day. That's all you
Exactly.
can do. And that's the most powerful thing that can be done. It's profitable propaganda. It's stealing beliefs, and also doing it. You can do it so in a way that it's illuminating or manipulating, right? And if you do it with out of good intentions, at the end of the day, you're just shedding a light on a better path for a lot of people in many cases. And that's the job. I mean, that's the job of an ethical marketers, right? If you could call it that.
Yes.
I think so, at least. What? Yeah, this is overlaps perfectly with the current question, because I think a lot of people have forgotten this, that marketing, that's what it's supposed to be doing. And most people are not doing that, right? They're focused on, how do I get this lead to, or like whatever, white paper downloads, all that stuff. Current state of affairs in B2B content marketing and trends. And I've seen your post on LinkedIn about influencer marketing and some other trends you were bullish on. I think influencer marketing you included, right? Am I wrong, or I don't know? Yeah, I think it was one.
I think it definitely done right. I think it's like everything. There's going to be massive success to be had, but I think there's going to be some big misses as well with that one.
Interesting. Okay, so yeah, run me through that. What is kind of like your vision right now state of affairs? Like, where does B2B content marketing stand? What is the current feel about it? How do people think about it, and where are we going?
Yeah, I think we're in the start, like in the first quarter of content marketing 2.0. Content marketing 1.0 was content for people searching for something. And then our content then appears after their search. So the most obvious example is SEO, keyword driven articles that like from the 2010s up to, a couple years ago is like the overwhelmingly dominant form of content marketing. So let's target these keywords. Let's write an article to try to rank for it and just get people to our website. And most of that content was pretty surface level. It wasn't really like, there were some that did it really well to build that trust and affinity and like be seen as the expert in the space. But a lot of it was just repurposing articles that were already written and like making listicles and all of this stuff to like have Google crawl it correctly. And what I think we're in now is like the 2.0 phase of that, because I think that is not going to go away, but that's going to change. And people's content consumption habits have changed a lot. And so now we're in the phase of like content marketing for scrollers, like people scrolling on LinkedIn, people scrolling on YouTube, people scrolling their podcast apps. So, 15 years ago, all of these channels really didn't exist. And so we need to, as marketers and content marketers, we need to actually follow the content consumption habits of the people we're trying to build relationships with, and realize the difference between 15 years ago and today. And so what that doesn't allow you to do, though, is have intent like you did with Google. Like people are typing in best CRM for XYZ. That doesn't happen in podcast apps. It does happen a little bit in YouTube, but it doesn't happen on social and LinkedIn and stuff like that. So the whole premise of the goal of those is to appeal to the far majority of your future buyers who are not actively looking for a solution today because they don't have a need right now. They're in a contract with another company for, like, they're in a contract with your competitor for another 8 months. So they're not looking on Google right now for an alternative. But if you can capture their attention with really great content that helps them in their job today, then in 8 months, when that contract is up and they want to look around what else is there, you will already be number 1, number 2, number 3 on that list because they already know you. They already have been following you. They have affinity towards you. They're not going to compare you off of a Google search and just put you on a list with everybody else that they don't know. They've already got that relationship built with you. And so it makes that sale far easier when they're ready. But it's hard to measure that on a short window and a short time period. But that's the goal of the, content for scrollers.
You just gotta understand how wide is the consciousness gap, and based off that, like, it's gonna take you more or less time to bridge it. And for some people, if your content is good enough, you can bridge a gap of 3 years of learning in a week if your content is good enough and it's organized and you have like a tight funnel. But you made a really great point about how it's really important to consume the culture and the feed and the just having the same consumption habits or similar, at least, especially when it comes to content. If we want to create content that attracts the people that we want to sell to, right? Want to have the same habits as them. And that, I think, for B2B means also getting their feet wet with consumer culture and starting to not cringe that much about TikTok and open the app every now and then, because there's too many marketers that are not on, like, B2B marketers. If you're not on TikTok and you're selling anything, like, I don't care anything. Teams are already, managers are millennials now. Like, there's not,
Yeah.
and they are on TikTok. Like, they're not your average boomer anymore. And so I think that also poses a question of how much aesthetic has meant for people to buy into ideas and products, therefore, and services after, right? I think nobody buys argument and logic anymore. Everybody buys aesthetic and persuasion based on their idea of what's desirable or not. And so if you're not aligned with what's desirable or not in as many levels as possible, depending on how permeable or like deep your solution goes into their lives, then you're not, there's no way you're selling, because there's also a overwhelming abundance of options, an increasing one. Even more so for the average consumer, which puts you in the most savage competition ever, which is amazing for the consumer, or could be, at least in theory, but really, really bad for us. It's really, I mean, it's a call it content warfare,
Yeah, people don't want to be sold to, and it's becoming much easier for people to realize when they're being sold to now than it was 10 years ago. And that's why, like, the influencer marketing thing, I'm saying B2B, I think there's massive opportunity there. But what I'm noticing on the, like, direct to consumer side and the, like, Instagram influencers, more on the consumer side, is that there's getting fatigue with the consumer side influencers. And I think that can happen on the B2B side, which is like people feeling like this influencer with, yes, it's like good content, good, like, platform native content that they're creating. It's not an ad, a conversion ad or anything. It's like a cool 60-second reel they created that's like an engaging story. But then it's like sponsored by, whatever. And I think there's getting to be some more question marks from the audience around, like, does this person even use this product? Are they just manipulating me because, like, this is the way to do marketing now? And so I think that same thing, you can lose trust and credibility if you do too much of that in B2B pretty quickly. And so you have to be careful with that.
I'm the first who has stopped buying from vendors that have done, collabs with influencers that haven't been disclosed or are just trash straight up. Like, it's just, I just don't want to buy anymore, because And it's not even about the product. Again, we come to the same, like, we're not buying out of logic here. We're buying, like, there's so many options. You're telling me I'm going to buy out of logic. Everything works. You're not surprising me with a feature. Like, it's not that, it's not about that. It's tell me how much are you going to care when I call customer support on a fucking Saturday, right? Like, are you going to reply to the email or not? Or, if I tell you I want to move to enterprise a quarter before our contract, are you going to be okay with that or not? It's this type of stuff. It's this intangibles. And that's why, this whole culture fit that's so overused now, but it should mean something, right? and I think it does. And with barriers of entry, the lowest there ever been for software, it's going to become, let's hope that we can focus on that, because I do think that then there will be, lots of value to create there, I think.
100%. Yeah. And that's why I think like it's this wave has not really hit B2B yet, but I can already see the arc of it having played out a little bit. And as we know, direct to consumer and like the more consumer based marketing is like usually 3 to 5 years ahead of B2B. So we can see how this is going to play out already. And I think there will be companies who do it really well. But then I think there's going to be some that it actually ends up being a net negative for their brand because people don't disclose, people who are promoting it don't actually use the product, people sign up for the product based on one of the influencers' recommendations, and then the product doesn't deliver. And then now that influencer has lost trust and credibility and the brand. And so the whole thing just starts to crumble after a little bit. So I believe smaller but deeper influencer relationships, that is, it's truly people who are believers in the product, users of the product, not overly promotional about the product, but can sort of help represent the brand. And it's a true partnership rather than like a paid promotion.
Evangelizing, and if your product is good enough, your users should already be doing that for free.
Exactly. Yep.
That's the thing. Clay, perfect example.
Yeah, perfect example.
Who haven't? I've talked about Clay before I got into the Clay Creator Program. I got into the Clay Creator Program just to put it like, to be honest, at the end of the day, it's more so about the genuine interest in driving that. That's what a great product should do. And if you do that well enough, then you won't be finding yourself either asking like, how do I get this influencer marketing thing right? Because it will come to you like just naturally. Exactly. People will tell you, creators, hey, I made this video already. Like, think it would be good for your next campaign or something like, this. People will have if you make it easy for them, if you incentivize them, if you educate them, et cetera, et cetera.
100%.
Also, I think a part of the big problem with the disclosure of influencer marketing campaigns and stuff is also being just short-sighted. Like, the reason they go wrong is because people are just too focused on this quarter, and this quarter is everything that matters. And because you're not seeing farther from that, then you're not going to see neither the good consequences or the bad consequences, and that's just a poor strategy.
Yeah, because like if we're talking about this influencer thing, it's like brand awareness and impressions does not mean, like, it's not synonymous with demand creation for the brand. So if you activate a bunch of creators and influencers on LinkedIn to all promote the company, it doesn't mean that those impressions have actually created demand for the company. There's a difference between attention and intent. And we want to create intent. We don't just want attention. And so when we look at, influencers and an influencer strategy, like very transactionally like that, it's very easy, in my opinion, to get hung up on how many impressions did this influencer drive for us this week, this month, whatever. And whereas if we look at, like, just in my example, working with Chris and Dave Gerhart, I have not cared about that at all. I have not looked at that over the last 4 years. And it's been one of the biggest drivers of pipeline and revenue for us, out of every single other thing we're doing, because I'm taking a more integrated long-term approach with it. And like, let's co-create content together. Let's, make this more natural and long-term rather than that, like, let's just get a bunch of impressions this month and, measure it on that. And if we don't get the right number of impressions, we're going to like cancel the engagement with this creator.
Off topic question. Have you guys thought about doing anything related to cinema? Like, if I say cinema, what do you think?
Like movie, documentaries,
high production stuff for
high
B2B.
production stuff. Yeah. 100%. I think that's coming. One of the reasons Hatch has grown is that the market is catching up to the strategy that we've been talking about for a long time. What you just described is one I'm actually very interested in and very excited about. I don't think the market's quite there yet, to be honest. I think that'll be the next evolution though. So everybody's now starting to do like this stuff, which is podcasts, YouTube series, LinkedIn content, like just this stuff's super obvious. Everybody should be doing it. But then the next one will be, how do we evolve this to like really take it to the next level and stand out and do something like that gets everybody talking and is really special.
Imagine if people were to talk about an SF billboard in the same way that they talk about a Super Bowl ad.
Exactly.
You know?
Exactly.
That's what I'm saying.
And that's
like,
moonshot content. Like I call that moonshot content. And I think you should first create your sustainable content engine. Get that. It's almost like you don't have the luxury to do a 6 or 12 month content strategy if your company is burning cash right now and you don't have pipeline. So like it's almost just like the order of operations is like, first, let's make sure we have good content going out on all the channels every week with our ongoing engine of content, podcast, YouTube, LinkedIn. But then once that's stable and executed well ongoing, let's do a moonshot. And maybe it won't pan out the way and that's the point of a moonshot is like, this could be our 10X or 100X thing if we get this right, but we're not betting the farm on it because we've already got the underlying foundation going.
And the foundation, operationalizing it and having it running in enough and efficient, like, you have your workflows in our team, for example. I have to be honest, my content engine is stopped. It's been stopped for a month now. But whatever. I don't want to talk about that. But we do I've been posting for a year, and it's this organized workflow. It's a foundation, right? And that foundation, systematizing it gives you also free time, because at the end of the day, if you organize yourself properly, I really only need to spend like 4 hours a week, if that, writing on Airtable my posts. I have my team scheduling it. Like it can be all done for you, right? If you set it up properly, and it really doesn't take that much like human labor time. I think it's more so about just putting the things in the right place. And so once you have that, I think the next step to that is not only doing moonshots, but then what I'm thinking of is like, how do we operationalize moonshots, right? Like, can we create something like not Hollywood, of course, because it's not going to. I mean, you could argue there's a comparable amount of wealth in the VC world or like tech than in Hollywood, if not more, right? Either way, but I think there's less of a market for it. But big companies and with this, as tools and technology become more available with AI, we're seeing possibilities. I mean, you get AI generated videos, and you get a filmer that has some eye for cinema and some B-roll and a good library in house. You can do amazing stuff, and you don't need a budget. Like you don't need 50,000, 100,000 to spend on 10 videos to do cinema and moonshots for B2B. It's more so about the strategic thinking. I think it's like the script and like, how do we play it out in a corporate comms friendly way, right? And this type of stuff. Yeah.
And the beautiful thing is like, you don't need or actually want 1 million people to consume that piece of content, because sometimes we forget in B2B, I think, is like, we actually shouldn't be more focused on the top line number of people in our audience if we're not also relating to that to the number of our people in our TAM. So like, okay, if there are only 10,000 companies or roles in roles at companies that we sell to, there's 10,000 of them, and we're getting 1,000 or 2,000 people to consume our content every week, you are doing an incredible job. you've now got 10% to 20% of your entire TAM consuming your content every single week. But some people can look at that 1,000 or 2,000 and say, well, that's not a lot, because they're used to going on YouTube and they see all these videos with 350,000 views or whatever. So we have to remember, it's not about the number of views. It's about the quality of the people behind that view in relation to your TAM. And so creating a moonshot piece of content, it doesn't need, the barometer of success doesn't need to be, 1 million views on YouTube. It needs to be the right percentage. Like a good percentage of your TAM consuming that is like all you need. And your TAM is likely not, millions of people in B2B.
I was about to call it market temperature, but I think percentage of TAM that has listened to your message is a better way to put it. Share of voice, after all, right?
Yeah.
But it's, that's a great way to put it. People don't realize this, and they're panicking. Oh, but I only have 1,000 followers. Man, you're doing ABM. You're telling me you have 10,000 accounts to target. What are you telling me? Like, come on. You're like 1/10 away from having your full TAM in your network. Like, come on.
10% of your market, 10% of your market in your audience. That is massive. That's a massive win.
Put it in perspective. Also, I think it's also like they listen to advice from performance marketers, from B2C or whatever, people that just come from a different, common analysis when working with clients. And it's, oh, no, we need just more top of funnel because it's usually the same thing, like big TAMs, super sophisticated market, whatever, then of course.
Yeah.
Either way.
You can see that with keywords too, like how people used to do that with search. It's like targeting like the low intent but high traffic keywords and, getting whatever, hundreds of thousands of like clicks per month, but creating close to zero sales out of that, rather than targeting like the super high intent but very low traffic keywords that actually result in sales. So that's like the same exact concept, just applied to this modern form of content. Totally.
Let's move on to the relationship between content and revenue and equity in B2B. What do you think is wrong with it? Why and how would you fix it?
Yeah, just in terms of like measuring it. And
exactly, there's many points. I mean, if you want to talk about it, we can talk about attribution. We can talk about, I think the most important one that we can talk about, especially that we've touched on influencer marketing, is compensation and equity and all. Compensation, equity, like how are these deals going to be structured differently more and more? And I've seen pricing models that are interesting, this media for equity model as well. And like, just, give me an ad that gives me a long shelf life of 9 months and helps me get to the Series B, and you get shares of that, or for whenever we raise, stuff like that. I don't know, what are your thoughts on this? How, and you can overlap it with the next question, which is Hatch pricing breakdown, and why you're operating on the pricing model that you're operating, and do you think that will evolve or not, and kind of tie that down to what it costs and what's behind the scenes of creating high performance content?
Yeah, when it comes to like just internal team structure, I think that there's going to be an audience co-founder on a lot of teams going forward. So like you've got the product. Usually what you've had in the past is you've had like the technical co-founder, and then like the sales, like revenue driving co-founder. I think that there'll be another one, or that sales, like revenue driving one will wear this hat, but like literally the role is like audience building. Like either they're bringing an audience that already, they already have an audience of the exact people you want to sell to. And so this person is now going to be a co-founder and on the cap table, and their job is to just continue to build the audience, foster the audience, build trust with the audience, so that, because like distribution is so much more important than like it's ever been. You used to be able to brute force like driving pipeline with just outbound and the predictable revenue model and stuff like that. But that still can work, by the way. Yeah, go ahead.
You still can, and most importantly, in other markets that are not US, I'll tell you that.
Yeah, and I don't believe anything is dead. Like I really do hate that like framing on LinkedIn and stuff. Like everything can work. It's just about how efficient is it, and like what's the cost to benefit for your market and your situation. But it's a simple fact that like outbound is so much more noisy than it used to be. And then at the same time, products are getting easier to build than ever with AI, go to Replit and like all these other AI coding, things. And like, it's about to explode, like the number of apps out there and things like that. So what's really hard though, to copy or replicate is distribution, like organic distribution on all the platforms and channels that people hang out on today. And so that's why I think this role of like, when we talk about revenue and equity and stuff like that, I think on the cap table, and I think it'd be very smart for a lot of companies to, even add somebody even after the company's been formed, is like just this audience founder, audience co-founder role. Same thing with marketers. So like an audience marketer. And so rather than, the content team being mostly having the background of like writing articles, we actually start like forming the content team a little bit more around like platform specialists and then like overall audience, an audience marketer to sort of own that entire department.
I love that. It's the same. It's the same parallel I've seen. Some of the best sales teams have been organized either in segments by ICP or by regions, right? Like it's always like that. You put sales reps by in their segment, mid market, SMB, or whatever. Depends on how you're structuring your go to market, because it needs to be aligned with what marketing is doing. This is the same thing, right?
Yeah.
Like you want your platform specialist because, again, the formatting, it's a whole different world. You don't want to use the same copy, the same tone in every platform. Like, cannot go with the same 3,000 character text post that Chris can add on LinkedIn, for example, with a clip. You put that on a shorts description, and it's like it. I mean, maybe for the meta SEO keywords, whatever, but you can put that in the tags. Like, I don't think it's nowhere near as impactful as it is on LinkedIn, for example, right?
100%.
Because in shorts, yeah. So that's a great insight on how to structure the teams. What do you think? Do you want to talk about? Let me not. I mean, as you wish. But since you're talking about teams and talent and structuring roles for content, can we bring up this whole melon of offshore versus Western talent for high performance content? So let me preface this with something. I think high performance content, or content that gives exponential organic distribution, is content that is, as we were talking before, creates best practice, right? And has a strong POV that is contrarian and educated, and not only argumented with logic, but wrapped in an aesthetic that resonates with the ICP. In order to do this right, you were saying like the main thing is not listening to anyone, or try as hard as possible to not be like anyone and be as true as possible to yourself. I think this goes in hand with knowing how to curate properly, knowing yourself on why you curate the way you curate, and how that relates to how your buyer curates content and what they consume just in general, right? And what they buy and what they feel. And the structure as well. Structure and then taste brand. Taste/brand. Like whether you structure
100%.
content or not, how much, and at what parts or what stage of consciousness. So for example, if you're at creating content for upmarket buyers that are in the problem, like they need to become aware of the problem first, are you going to make that content super structured in a tight funnel so that it's organized for them, easier to understand? Or are you going to make it harder so that only, people that are actually already trying hard to see the problem, or that are a little bit more intelligent or have a different background, whatever, will have an easier time to understand you if it's like more scattered, because they will connect the dots? Or like, do you want them to connect the dots? All this stuff. I want you, like, my question is all this to say, what does it take internally? We've talked about roles, pricing wise. Like, how much does it cost to get this intangible? Because it's really, you know what I mean? Like,
Yeah, this is a good topic. I guess I'll put it like this. I believe a 3-person content team, like to start, is all you need, and it can equal the performance of, or even achieve a greater performance than the equivalent of 25 BDRs or SDRs if it's done right. And so those 3 roles would be the thought leader or subject matter expert, who's going to be the face of the content brand. So ideally, this is someone who is internal to your company, whether it's the CEO or another like exec, and they have the experience that is the exact same experience and background as the people that you sell to, or they have deep experience in that industry and things like that. You can still do it if you're selling to like CFOs and you've never been one and you're like the marketer. Like you can still do it, but it's just a much harder connection to make than if like I have 10 years in the finance, role at companies exactly like yours. Like it's just a much more authentic, and honestly valuable to that audience. So that's number one, is that person. Number two would be what I call the content architect. And so this person I recommend being internal. I do not recommend outsourcing your content strategy. I think internal, I think you all should have the ability to know who your audience is, to know what they care about, to get consultation on best practices for content and stuff. But like ultimately, you all should own the strategy of like your content direction and knowing this will perform best for our audience because we know our audience so well. I think it's really hard to outsource that effectively. And then the third role is your like producer or production team, essentially. And this is the role that Hatch fits in. And that's essentially like, cool, we've got the subject matter expert who's going to be creating the content. We've got the content architect who's going to help power the subject matter expert with topics to talk about, how to talk about them, facilitate, recordings and conversations, and sort of like be the person, that allows the subject matter expert to ideally show up and record. And that's it.
Can you dig deeper on that? That's the content architect. Is he also supposed to curate the content of the SME? Like in the sense that is he also a distributor, or like is that part of the production team? Because it's more of a technical thing. Because I do believe like distribution is not only like putting it in a scheduler. It's also strategically talking to people. Exactly, right? Like it's a big thing. Like if you want to, especially with the moonshots, for example, right? Like you want to make it a whole thing. If there's a newsletter, shoot over an email. If there's like, et cetera, et cetera. So is that the role of the content architect, or is it part of the production team?
Yep. Okay. They own the distribution and publishing, and they own the pre-production, and then the production team owns the creation of the asset. Like, here's the raw material. Let's execute it at like platform native perfectly to what we want, how we want it to look, feel, be edited, like all of those things. And then it's basically all queued up for them. Cause like a content architect should not be spending their time doing that stuff, spending 20 hours, making the content look the way that they want and feel the way that they want. That should be outsourced. But what can't be outsourced is the original insights and the positioning of what we're talking about and how we're talking about it, the promise of our content, all of those things. So that's honestly, like, to get started, that's really just the three roles you need, is like, and you can expand from there. Like that one content architect, you do kind of need to try to see if you can have them be a little bit of a jack of all trades. Like they know LinkedIn, they know YouTube, they know podcasts a little bit. But as you evolve, you can say, okay, we're going to add a LinkedIn platform specialist to this team. Then we're going to add a YouTube specialist to the team, a podcast specialist, and you can still have the production team power everything. But now you've just got like true domain expertise on all the platforms that you care about.
As the numbers add up, of course, is the dream, right? Like if you make it, like exactly, if you make every channel profitable enough, yeah. Well, I like to think that sometimes, clients confirm that sometimes we act as that kind of like content architect in a way, right? Because it's making it easy for them to, what to talk about, how, but the original insight from usually when it's a great client, it comes from them. Sometimes though, we always like to suggest, insights, and then, through talking, give them form and whatnot. Okay, so to wrap up, I wanted to bring this up because I've been following this guy. You may not be familiar with him, but he's called Eugene Brandstrat. I don't know what is his actual name, but a brand strategy consultant that makes videos on TikTok about he's been talking about the post brain rot era, and whatever. It's not about the creator. What I want to talk about here is about post-COVID consumer and prosumer culture and status symbols in B2B. Like how has this changed? Chris Walker has talked about this before, especially with, I think one of the points where he got his feet wet with this is with SRA, right? People fill in surveys saying that they've seen you on a podcast because it shows that you're more of an insider than to say that you were influenced by an ad. To say that you were influenced by an ad is to say that at the end of the day, you're just susceptible to publicity, right? Which is, sorry, I said Chris Walker said this. This was from Dale Harrison, actually, which is the complete opposite. But either way, what I'm trying to get to with this is kind of like your take on why I think most B2B marketers are coming back or calling marketers to come back to the fundamental principles of direct response marketing, kind of like just the psychology of, hey, why haven't, like the 4 Ps, and why haven't you stopped to think what's desirable and what isn't to your ICP before marketing to them,
Yeah, I think this is a big trend that I've noticed as well. And I think it's good. But we kind of need both. So like what I like about self-reported attribution is that it's generally right, but it's not 100% right either. But if you take if you just look at first touch or last touch or the digital attribution touch points, like you're going to be almost 100% wrong. Like if that's the singular data point you're using as to like what created this customer. So it's like, would we rather be generally right or usually wrong, And so like, and the point there is like, I don't think there's a perfect, like, I think it's really hard to get just a perfect analysis of like, where did these customers come from? What's working? But I do think that, again, we just need to follow the behavior of consumers. Let's take it to the LemonPie days. We would get a client, a CEO, on 25 podcasts in their industry over 3 months. And then they would get inbound from people who listened to those podcasts saying, hey, I heard about your company and your CEO from a podcast. What you won't be able to do a lot of times is know which podcast that came from. But you'll just know that the strategy is working. Like, you should see that the strategy is working. Like, people are saying they're hearing about us through podcasts. But do we know which one of those 25 so it'd almost be like, instead of trying to specifically attribute with like a UTM tag or something, like in the show notes of each one or something like that, we just want to know that the overall strategy is working. And that's how I look at, like, I'm a big fan of ads. I think that their ads should not go away. That they never will. I think they're very effective. How you do them and when you do them and in what way all evolves, and there's smart ways to approach it. But all of this stuff works together. Organic plus paid works together. And all we're trying to do is capture attention in the way that people are hanging out online, and having them know that when they have a need for something, that we are the company that can solve that need. And so I think it's just about looking at how people are behaving now. And it's really difficult to like have 100% certainty on these things. But I always just take the mindset of like, we should be able to see that this strategy is working. This particular piece of content, it's like, are we going to measure our entire LinkedIn strategy on a single LinkedIn post? Like, we shouldn't, but like, that's how some people kind of think about that. And so, that's a little bit on that.
Yeah, because deep down, that's what they want. They want a silver bullet. They don't want a vast array of an ocean of grays where you need to work and think and strategize and get the engine going and oil it and fix it and update it and scale it. And of course, they don't want that. They want a post that makes me rich for 2 years. Come on, man. Like, I mean, and the problem is that there's good examples of that. There's people that run posts on thought leader ads that have been running for 9 months and they're printing. But man, that's one in something. Like, you got to do 300 before, right? To get to that one winning ad. And it's like, People only want that, and they don't get that the value is in doing the whole process previously, or and if they get it, they don't want to do it. So whatever.
Yeah, but every single strategy works. It's just not predictable when exactly it will work for you. And so if you're not willing to like have that patience, then it will never work for you. And it will actually, it's like, it's way more expensive to quit too early or to think something's not working when it really is, than to just continue investing in that until it works. Because every single strategy, this is proven. We can get examples of companies doing every single strategy we've talked about today that have absolutely dominated with it. So if somebody is doing it, it means it can be done, and they're doing it in your category. So it's not a, does this work? Or that's almost like a red flag to me when I hear like, well, we don't know if this will work, or will this work, or can it work? To me, it's not about will it or can it. It absolutely can and will. It's just, should you do this particular one now? And are you willing to measure it and think about it the right way so that you can get it to work?
Like when and how, basically. Yeah.
Yeah.
And that's why you probably need to talk to a consultant like Erik. So where can people find you? Is there anything you would like to promote?
Yeah, thanks, man. Yeah, so you can check us out at hatch.fm. And yeah, we are that sort of production team. So we power video podcasts, short form video content for LinkedIn, YouTube channels, all of that stuff to help be the production team powering this entire content engine that we've talked about.
It would be really cool to put in the podcast midway through, sponsored by Hatch. By the way, Hatch for a moment was it a product, or you guys have an internal product? I'm mistaken, or
no? It was never a product. Always services. We've reduced, like over time we've confined the scope to almost feel like product like, but no, it's a service. It's agency.
Tech-enabled service, just properly systematized. Yeah, good stuff. Well, go check it out. Pricing on page, not gatekeeping, just in case, because people, if they don't know, they won't visit the website, Either way, it's been a pleasure, man. And I think, hope to have you back at some point later in the year. It's probably going to be new topics. This year's going to be packed of stuff.
Oh, yeah. 100%. It's moving fast. Yeah, appreciate you having me on, Will.
Yeah, it's been a pleasure to stay in touch.
Thank you for listening to the FounderVideo podcast with Will Yuste. See you on the next episode.